Beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount lies a secret that has remained hidden for 3,000 years. What scientists discovered there doesn't just confirm ancient texts, it challenges everything we thought we knew about history, religion, and the capabilities of ancient civilizations. For decades, this 35-acre platform has been considered too sacred, too politically charged, too dangerous to excavate. But an accident in the late 1990s opened a door that was never meant to be opened. And what came through has left researchers speechless. This is the story of that discovery. The Temple Mount stands in Jerusalem's Old City like a fortress of faith. Jews call it Har HaBayit. Muslims know it as Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary. To Christians, it's the backdrop of Christ's most dramatic moments. For Jews, this is ground zero, the holiest place on earth. Here, Solomon built the first temple nearly 3,000 years ago, a structure said to house the Ark of the Covenant itself, guarded by golden cherubim, filled with the literal presence of God. When Babylonians destroyed it in 586 BCE, the Jewish people rebuilt. That second temple stood for centuries until Roman legions razed it in 70 CE, leaving only the western wall standing. For Muslims, this is where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the night journey. The Golden Dome of the Rock, built in 691 CE, still marks that sacred spot. For a time, Muslims even prayed toward Jerusalem before the direction shifted to Mecca. For Christians, this is where Jesus overturned the money changers' tables, declaring that his Father's house should be a place of prayer, not commerce. One site, three faiths, thousands of years of blood, prayer, and mystery. But here's what makes the Temple Mount truly unique. Despite its massive historical significance, virtually no one has ever excavated beneath it. The ground remains sealed, untouched, forbidden. Every empire that conquered Jerusalem left its mark on the Temple Mount. The Persians allowed the Jews to rebuild. The Greeks desecrated it. The Romans destroyed it. The Byzantines built churches over the ruins. The Umayyads constructed the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. Then came the Crusaders, the Ottomans, the British. Each civilization reshaped the mount, rebuilt its walls, reimagined its purpose. Yet through every conquest and reconstruction, one belief persisted. This place is where heaven touches earth. Jewish tradition speaks of the Shekinah, the divine presence, that once dwelled in the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of Solomon's temple. That belief has never died. It lives in prayers, in ancient texts, in the collective memory of millions. But despite the weight of history pressing down on this site, the mount remains unexplored. Religious tensions and political realities have made scientific excavation impossible. Only small, unauthorized projects and adjacent tunnels have offered glimpses into what lies below. Those glimpses suggested something extraordinary was waiting to be found. They were right. Digging beneath most ancient sites is straightforward. You get permits, bring equipment, and let the earth reveal its secrets. But the Temple Mount isn't like other sites. Beneath this platform lies the beating heart of three global religions, surrounded by political tensions so volatile that a single shovel strike could trigger international conflict. Since the 1800s, explorers have been drawn to the Mount's buried past. British engineer Charles Warren was among the first, descending into hidden shafts and ancient tunnels beneath Jerusalem. What he found, chambers carved into bedrock, water channels, mysterious voids, raised tantalizing questions about what else might be hidden below. But Warren's explorations came at a cost. Religious authorities quickly shut down further investigation. The idea of digging under the Temple Mount became unthinkable. For Jews, the Mount is the holiest place on earth. The Holy of Holies, where God's presence once dwelled, is believed to lie somewhere beneath the surface. Jewish law explicitly forbids stepping onto that space unknowingly. That fear alone has kept generations of religious Jews from even walking on the plaza. For Muslims, the Mount houses the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. The Islamic Waqf, based in Jordan, has maintained religious control over the site for decades and guards it fiercely. The arrangement between Israel and the Waqf is fragile. Any action perceived as threatening Muslim sovereignty can spark violence, riots, and diplomatic crises. As one archaeologist put it, digging here isn't about history. It's about war and peace. For decades, the ground remained sealed. Scientists could only wonder what lay beneath. Then, in the late 1990s, everything changed. In 1999, during unauthorized renovations on the Temple Mount, something unprecedented happened. Without archaeological supervision or documentation, workers dug up hundreds of truckloads of earth and dumped them in the Kidron Valley, just outside the old city walls. Just like that, thousands of years of potential history were scattered like garbage. Most would have let that soil disappear. But a group of Israeli archaeologists saw an opportunity that would never come again. In 2004, they launched the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Operating from a public park in East Jerusalem, volunteers began the painstaking process of sifting through every bucket of discarded dirt by hand. Piece by piece, year after year. What they found was staggering. More than 500,000 artifacts emerged from that dumped soil, offering a cross-section of 3,000 years of human activity. Coins from Herod's time, Crusader-era arrowheads, Islamic jewelry, Roman glass, Byzantine mosaics. But as the team continued sifting, they noticed something else. A pattern emerging from the debris. Artifacts tied to ritual purity, worship practices, and temple functions began appearing with unusual frequency. Then they found items from the First Temple period, a time many scholars had dismissed as more legend than history. A fragment of pottery with painted patterns dating to the 8th century BCE. Oil lamps, charred animal bones, ceremonial vessels. Then came something extraordinary. A team member discovered a tiny, hardened lump of clay. Flattened and cracked with age, it turned out to be a bulla, a seal impression once used to secure official scrolls. Under magnification, an ancient Paleo-Hebrew inscription came into focus. It read, Gedaliahu, son of Immer. The name hit like a thunderbolt. In the book of Jeremiah, Immer is identified as a priestly family active during the First Temple period. This seal hadn't just survived 3,000 years. It confirmed the existence of a real person once thought lost to myth. More bully followed. Names and titles that aligned with biblical records. Symbols like menorahs, temple gates, priestly garments. The dating was consistent. The writing was authentic. These weren't scattered artifacts. They were the shattered pieces of a priestly bureaucracy that once functioned on the Temple Mount itself. One delicate find stood out, a carved ivory comb with teeth still intact. Etched into its side was one of the earliest complete Canaanite sentences ever discovered, referencing personal hygiene and possibly ritual purity. An everyday object made sacred by context. Then came tools more directly tied to worship, a small bronze incense shovel, coated in blackened residue from ancient aromatic offerings. Finely made jewelry, possibly belonging to temple workers, perhaps lost during moments of panic or exile. But it was the deepest, oldest layer that drew the most intrigue. Despite official claims that no clear proof of Solomon's temple had ever been found, physical evidence was mounting. These items weren't just old, they were specific. They aligned too perfectly with descriptions of ritual duties, priestly lineages, and holy practices to dismiss. Each artifact pulled from the soil was another crack in the wall of doubt. Another hint that this place, once thought to exist only in faith, had been real, tangible, and active. As archaeologists studied the distribution of finds, a pattern emerged. These artifacts hadn't scattered randomly. They came from a particular section of debris, suggesting they originated from a specific area, possibly one that had collapsed or been deliberately hidden long ago. That pattern pointed towards sealed chambers and forgotten passageways. Spaces that no one had entered in over 1,000 years. And that's exactly what they found next. Between 2021 and 2024, a new research team combined cutting-edge technology with overlooked maps from the British Mandate era. Their focus, the southern edge of the Temple Mount, near the Western Wall. The British, Ottomans, and earlier travelers had long hinted at strange underground voids, chambers, stairs, hollow spaces. But for generations, those whispers remained just rumors. Then, in 2023 came the breakthrough. Since excavation was forbidden, scientists relied on ground-penetrating radar, the same technology used to detect hidden chambers in Egypt's pyramids. The scans revealed irregularities beneath the bedrock. Straight edges where nature doesn't make them. Geometric patterns. The signatures of human construction. The data showed what looked like sealed subterranean chambers buried under centuries of rubble and construction. The team cross-referenced the radar scans with hand-drawn maps from the early 1900s, made by British officers briefly allowed to explore parts of the mount during the Ottoman Empire's twilight. To their astonishment, the outlines matched perfectly. The same corridors. The same blocked staircases. The same suspicious voids. The next step required extreme caution. Excavation near the western wall tunnels, just outside the mount's official boundaries, was legally permitted and already underway. As workers carefully cleared debris from an old Herodian structure, they uncovered a partially buried staircase carved into limestone. It led down into a forgotten antechamber. Inside, time had stood still. The chamber's upper walls bore Byzantine-era carvings, faded crosses, niche alcoves, inscriptions. The space had clearly served as a Christian worship site, likely in the 4th or 5th century CE. But what lay beneath the floor was far more compelling. Digging just inches deeper, researchers struck a second foundation. And this one was much, much older. The base stones were massive, finely cut ashlar blocks stacked with precision rarely seen after the First Temple period. They mirrored building techniques found at Solomon's Gate in Megiddo, a hallmark of ancient Israelite engineering. This changed everything. This wasn't just a Byzantine chapel. It was built on top of something far older, something forgotten. Stratigraphy and residue analysis confirmed it. This lower layer predated Herod's temple renovations, possibly by several centuries. Its placement, tucked beneath the mount, aligned with biblical descriptions of sacred zones, hinted at a very specific purpose. Then came a chilling realization. A secondary staircase, half collapsed and filled with debris, trailed deeper into the rock. It had been intentionally blocked, not by time or natural disaster, but by human hands. Someone long ago had wanted this place hidden, sealed, locked away like a door that should never be opened again. What were they trying to protect or conceal? The chamber's location, architectural style, and alignment with ancient texts all pointed toward one possibility. This had once been part of the inner sanctuary, or a pathway toward it. But they weren't ready to confirm that. Not yet. First, they needed more proof. That proof came from beneath the stone, in a water system that shouldn't exist. While surveying the ground beneath the southern edge of the Temple Mount, scientists discovered a series of interconnected voids. These weren't burial sites or storage pits. They were curved, precisely cut, and lined with waterproof plaster. As they mapped the system, a pattern emerged, a vast underground network of cisterns, channels, and aqueducts carved directly into bedrock. It shouldn't have been there. Carbon dating of mineral residue around the plaster layers shocked the team. These weren't Herodian or Roman constructions. They dated to the First Temple period, roughly the 8th to 9th century BCE. But the real surprise was the sophistication. The system showed hydrological planning far ahead of its time. It was designed to control water flow, balance pressure, and store large quantities in a region notoriously dry most of the year. Some channels featured narrow feeding tunnels allowing runoff to fill reservoirs without causing stagnation. Others had overflow ducts redirecting water to secondary chambers, ensuring supply without flooding. This wasn't just utility infrastructure. It was sacred engineering. When researchers overlaid the cistern map with ancient descriptions, something clicked. Several cisterns aligned perfectly with locations mentioned in the Book of Chronicles, describing water preparations made by King Hezekiah and earlier kings to support temple rituals. One particularly large basin sat beneath a spot that, according to Hebrew texts, once held the altar of sacrifice. This basin, lined with thick ash layers and faint organic residue, showed signs of repeated use. It may have been part of daily priestly routines, ritual hand-washing, cleansing of tools, libation offerings. Scholars had long believed First Temple worship was largely symbolic and minimally organized. But this system told a different story, one of complex spiritual logistics designed for precise function. If the temple builders planned the water system with this level of mastery, it meant they engineered everything else with equal care. The flow of worshippers, purification cycles, the timing of offerings. This wasn't primitive religion. This was a machine of holiness, operated with mathematical precision. And the aqueduct lines led directly to a specific area beneath the mount, an area that had just been reopened after more than 1,000 years. What they found there would change everything. Deep beneath the southern edge of the Temple Mount, past ancient water channels and buried priestly chambers, the team found it, a sealed stone threshold. 4 weeks, they'd worked toward it, brushing aside debris, documenting every inch. But nothing prepared them for what waited behind that final wall. The chamber was small, no more than 10 feet across. Walls cut straight into bedrock, smooth and undecorated. But what sat in the center stopped them cold. A stone basin, round and shallow, lay half-buried in ash. Around it, fragments of burned incense, small offerings, and blackened clay oil lamps from the First Temple period had been arranged with deliberate care. Unlike other areas, this space hadn't collapsed with time. It had been deliberately sealed, as if those who hid it intended for it to remain untouched forever. The basin bore markings, faded by time, but legible under the archaeologists' lights. Not decorative carving, not abstract symbols. Writing, etched in Paleo Hebrew. The script read, "He who dwells here, his spirit never leaves." The team fell silent. The inscription's weight wasn't just in its poetry, but in its meaning. Those words aligned with ancient biblical descriptions of the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber where, according to Scripture, the Shekinah, the divine presence, rested. It was a space so sacred that only the high priest could enter, and only once a year, on Yom Kippur. To ancient Israelites, it was the literal meeting point between heaven and earth. No object from that space had ever been recovered. No proof had ever surfaced. Until now. The dating was quickly confirmed. The lamps matched others from the 8th to 7th century BCE. The basin's limestone matched materials used during Solomon's reign. The inscription's phrasing and structure were identical to phrases found in First Temple-era religious texts, some recently recovered from the Dead Sea Scrolls. This chamber delivered what generations of archaeologists had only dreamed of: physical, datable evidence of the most sacred zone beneath the Temple Mount, directly aligned with biblical tradition. For the first time, those sacred words had been found in stone, in a sealed chamber, directly beneath the Temple Mount. This wasn't just a religious relic. It was tangible proof, not of myth, but of faith made physical. A moment where the spiritual crossed into the material world. The chamber, the basin, the ash, all testified that this was the place where ancient Israelites believed the Shekinah had dwelled. Scientists were stunned. Religious leaders fell silent. Even skeptics paused. Because regardless of one's beliefs, one fact was now undeniable. A sacred presence had once been acknowledged, revered, and sealed away beneath the Temple Mount. And someone had left behind a message to ensure the truth was never forgotten. The discovery sent quiet shockwaves through academic circles. Not just because it was ancient, not just because it was sealed, but because what lay inside aligned too perfectly with stories long thought symbolic or exaggerated. For many, this was the moment that blurred the line between faith and fact. News of the chamber wasn't officially announced. Not in full. Instead, it leaked in fragments among scholarly circles, whispered about in academic forums and private religious institutions. Authorities aware of the political and religious sensitivity deliberately held back from wide publicity. While the chamber offers clarity to some, it poses a threat to others. The Temple Mount remains sacred to Jews, Muslims, and Christians. Any assertion that one tradition's narrative has been proven could ignite protests, unrest, or worse. Officials are treading carefully, keeping press briefings vague, avoiding definitive claims. Some Christian groups see the find as a sign of prophetic fulfillment, tangible proof linking modern Israel to ancient scripture. The temple had always been seen as the physical seat of divine human contact. Now, they argue, there's proof. Many Orthodox Jewish leaders urged caution, even mourning. The idea that someone had stepped into or uncovered the area of the Shekinah was deeply troubling. According to tradition, Doing so without proper spiritual preparation is a transgression of the highest order. For them, the find is not just sacred but forbidden. Muslim authorities have remained largely silent publicly, though concerns about the discovery's implications for their narrative and control of the site run deep. Behind closed doors, however, the race has begun. Top archaeologists and physicists are now lobbying for non-invasive techniques like muon imaging, particle scanning famously used in 2017 to detect hidden voids in the Great Pyramid of Giza. The hope is that without disturbing the surface, researchers can map more chambers that may still lie hidden beneath the Temple Mount. Historians and biblical scholars are revisiting long-dismissed texts, reconsidering ancient descriptions of temple layouts, priestly rituals, and mystical concepts like the Shi-China as real, spatially grounded phenomena. New grants and international collaborations are being discussed quietly. The site, once seen as too controversial to explore, may now hold the most valuable religious archaeological find of the century. But what stunned many scholars wasn't just the age of the discovery, it was what it represented. This wasn't simply about proving an old story. It was about understanding how ancient people shaped their world around belief. How they engineered sacredness into stone, water, and space. What happens next remains uncertain. Access is limited. Politics are fragile. Religious tensions are real. But one thing is now clear. We have glimpsed something real, something hidden for 3,000 years that millions once believed was the center of the world. 4 centuries, the Temple Mount has stood as a symbol of faith, a monument to belief. Now it stands as something more, evidence that faith and history are not separate stories, but 2 sides of the same truth. We may not have the full picture yet, but for the first time in human history, we are no longer looking at the Temple Mount from above. We're looking at it from within. And what we found changes everything.